When the doctor told me I had cancer, my husband cried more than I did. Looking back, that should have been my first hint. That moment is etched in my memory. The sterile smell of disinfectant, the buzzing of fluorescent lights, and my husband, Daniel, gripping my hand so tightly that his knuckles turned white. I remember thinking that maybe he was just scared of losing me. I didn't cry that day. I was too shocked. But Daniel did. His sobs were heavy and loud, causing the nurse to shift uncomfortably. He kept saying, "We'll get through this, baby. I'll take care of everything." At that moment, those words felt like love. Now, they seem more like the start of a performance. Before the lies, the signatures, and the empty bank account, our life was quiet and predictable. We lived in a small 2-bedroom house in a middle-class neighborhood just outside Austin. It was the kind of place where the mailman knew your dog's name, and everyone waved as they drove by. Daniel and I had been married for 12 years. I worked part-time as a librarian, and he ran a small home renovation business. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. Every month, I set aside a little money for our dream trip to Italy, a promise we made on our 5th anniversary. He was charming, funny, and always knew just the right way to calm me down. When my mother passed away, he took care of everything: the funeral, the insurance paperwork, even calling relatives that I couldn't face. I used to tell my friends, I don't know what I'd do without him. That was the cruelest irony. Because soon, I would find out exactly what I'd do without him. It started in early spring. I had been feeling exhausted, and sometimes dizzy, as well as short of breath after climbing stairs. I thought it was just stress, or maybe low iron, but Daniel insisted I see a doctor for a full checkup. He booked the appointment himself. He even drove me there, waited in the lobby with a bouquet of carnations, and brought me lunch. When the doctor called us into the office, Daniel squeezed my hand again. The doctor, a man I didn't know, and not my regular physician, looked serious. He showed us a scan, and said there were irregular cells in my lymph nodes. Cancer. I remember Daniel catching his breath. He covered his mouth, whispered my name like a prayer, then hugged me tightly, making it hard to breathe. The doctor spoke about early detection, treatment options, and specialist referrals. I barely heard any of it. My mind felt foggy and overwhelmed. Daniel did all the talking. He asked questions about costs, insurance, and timelines. He told the doctor he wanted the best. Money isn't an issue. When we got home, he insisted I rest. He said he'd handle the finances, call the insurance company, and find specialists. I didn't argue. My body felt heavy with fear, and it was easier to let him take the lead. For the next few weeks, everything centered around my treatment. Daniel said he found a private oncology clinic that could start chemotherapy immediately. He showed me a glossy brochure with smiling patients and promises of hope, healing, and renewal. But it wasn't covered by insurance. He said we'd need to pay out of pocket first, about $45,000 to start. I panicked. That was nearly all our savings. But Daniel was convincing. He said, "What's money if you don't have your life, Sarah? We can rebuild savings. I can't rebuild you." I cried that night, feeling both guilty and grateful. The next morning, he handed me papers, bank transfer forms, and some authorizations. He said the clinic needed both our signatures, since it was a joint account. I remember my hands shaking as I signed. I felt like I was signing away my fear. I didn't realize I was signing away my trust. The following week, he started driving me to appointments. Each time, He dropped me off at a large building downtown, an office complex with glass doors and medical signage. He said the clinic was on the 3rd floor, but never let me go up alone. He always said, "You're too weak. I'll handle check-in." Then he'd come back an hour later, saying my session was done and that they just gave me mild injections for now. I thought it was strange that I never met any nurses or doctors after that first visit. But Daniel always had an explanation. "They're busy, or you were sedated. You wouldn't remember." Sometimes, when I said I didn't feel sick enough for chemo, he assured me the medicine was working. It's a new method, no hair loss, minimal nausea. He even bought me scarves, just in case. Looking back, everything was so dramatic. The way he prepared soups for me, the soft music he played in the evenings, and the way he sighed heavily when he thought I was asleep. I thought it was love. I thought it was devotion. It was a calculation. 3 months went by like that. 3 months of fear and fake appointments, during which I slowly gave up control. I stopped working. Daniel said rest was essential. He started handling all the mail, calls, and bills. I didn't even check my email anymore. My world shrank to the 4 walls of our bedroom, the smell of chamomile tea, and the sound of his footsteps pacing downstairs. But one night, something small, almost insignificant, broke the illusion. It was a Tuesday. Daniel said he was heading to a late meeting with a contractor. I was half asleep when I heard the front door close. An hour later, the phone rang. It was the bank. A polite voice asking to confirm a recent transfer, $27,000, to a private account under Daniel's name. My stomach dropped. I asked, "A transfer, for what?" The woman on the line hesitated. "It says medical expense personal authorization." I hung up before she could finish. My hands were shaking. I told myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe the clinic required it. Maybe Daniel was paying in. But as I sat there, staring at the dark hallway, the more the truth whispered to me something wasn't right. The next day, when I casually asked him about it, his eyes flickered. Just for a second. A micro-expression, like a curtain lifting. That's when the seed of suspicion finally took root. The next morning, Daniel acted normal, or at least he tried. He hummed while making coffee, kissed my forehead, and asked how I slept. But I couldn't look at him the same way anymore. That flicker in his eyes when I asked about the transfer wasn't confusion. It was fear, and maybe guilt, the kind that hides behind forced smiles. I told myself not to jump to conclusions. He had stood by me through everything. He was my husband. He wouldn't lie about something this cruel. But the thought kept circling in my mind like a vulture waiting for something to die. That afternoon, I checked our mail for the first time in months. Daniel had started forwarding most bills to his email, so there wasn't much left. One envelope caught my eye. It was from our insurance provider. The letter said, "Your claim for oncology treatment was denied because no procedure or consultation was found on record." My breath caught in my throat. I read it again. And again. No procedure on record. It had to be a mistake. Maybe he paid out of pocket. Maybe the clinic didn't report it. But still, I felt something break quietly inside me, like glass cracking under pressure. That evening, I waited for him to come home. I didn't mention the letter. I wanted to watch him, his words, his movements, his eyes. When he walked through the door, he looked tired but oddly tense. There was sweat on his collar, and his hands trembled slightly. "How was your appointment?" he asked. I looked at him carefully. "I didn't go today." I stayed home. He blinked, almost too quickly. Right, of course. I forgot we rescheduled. That was the moment I knew he was improvising. Over the next few days, I started keeping a small notebook. I noted every inconsistency. The clinic phone number he gave me always went to voicemail. The business card for the doctor looked like it had been printed at home. The receipts he showed me had the same handwriting. I even drove to that building one morning while he was at work. I told the receptionist I had an appointment with Dr. Mason. She frowned. "There's no Dr. Mason here, ma'am. This is a real estate office." My legs went weak. I sat down on a bench outside and stared at the street. People walked by, laughing, carrying coffee cups, talking about their day, while my entire reality tilted. I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry. But mostly, I wanted to understand. Why would he do this? Why pretend I was sick? Money, sure. But how could a husband, someone I shared a life and a bed with, fabricate cancer just to drain our savings? That night, when he got home, I pretended everything was normal. I made his favorite dinner, roast chicken with lemon and thyme. We sat at the table, and I watched him eat. He talked about a new project and how soon we'd have enough saved for my next round of treatment. I asked him casually, "When is that appointment again?" He froze with his fork halfway to his mouth. Then, in that perfectly rehearsed voice, he said, "Next Thursday. I'll call you a day before." He smiled, but the skin around his eyes didn't move. I smiled back, pretending to believe him. Inside, I was planning. The next morning, I went to the police. Not to report him, not yet. I just wanted advice. The officer, a woman named Detective Ortiz, listened quietly as I told her everything. She asked, "Do you have proof the money's gone?" "Not yet," I said. "He controls all the online banking." "Then, get it," she said gently. "Don't confront him until you know exactly what's happening. And don't sign anything else." Her tone was calm and professional, but there was something else bitty that scared me more than anything. So, I began collecting proof. I found a way to reset our online banking passwords, something Daniel had changed for security reasons. What I saw made me sick to my stomach. Almost every dollar from our savings was gone. Transfers spread over months, labeled with vague notes, medical expenses, consultations, equipment, all into an account under his name. And then the part that made my hands go cold: new purchase history. Plane tickets. A hotel reservation in Cancun. 2 passengers. The date. Just a week away. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay next to him, listening to his breathing. Every inhale and exhale felt like a lie filling the room. I imagined him on that beach, drinking margaritas with someone else, maybe the woman he'd been texting late at night when he thought I was asleep. I remembered those texts now. "Work emergencies," he said. Client quotes. And I thought about all the times he told me, "Don't worry about money. Just focus on healing." Healing from what? From a disease that didn't exist. 2 days later, I decided to test him. I told him I wanted to meet my doctor, that I had questions about my next round of treatment. He looked startled. "You don't need to worry about that, Sarah. I already handled everything," I insisted. "If I'm going through chemo, I have a right to talk to my doctor." He went silent. His jaw clenched. Then he smiled, but it wasn't warm. It was tight, stretched, like rubber over steel. "Fine," he said. "I'll arrange it." I nodded. "Good. I'll call the clinic myself if you're busy. That's when I saw it panic, raw and unfiltered, flash across his face. He snapped, "Don't call them. You'll just confuse the staff. Let me handle it." I stared at him quietly. "Why would I confuse them, Daniel?" He didn't answer. He just grabbed his keys and left the house. That was the night everything inside me turned cold. The next morning, I went to the bank in person. I told them my husband and I had joint accounts, and I wanted statements printed. The teller looked hesitant but obliged. She slid the papers across the counter pages filled with withdrawals, transfers, and credit card charges I didn't recognize. Designer clothes, jewelry, a down payment on a luxury car. My name wasn't on any of them. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about money. It was about erasing me. He was building a new life, a new identity, funded by the death of the one he pretended I was dying from. That night, I sat on the couch, lights off, bank papers spread around me like crime scene photos. I heard his car pull up, the jingle of his keys, the easy whistle he always did before entering like he was walking into his kingdom. And I thought, you have no idea what's waiting for you tonight. Because for the first time in months, I wasn't afraid. I was awake. And I was ready. The front door opened. Daniel stepped inside, humming softly, his face lighting up with that same fake warmth I once found comforting. "Hey, sweetheart," he said, placing his keys on the counter. "How are you feeling today?" I didn't answer. He looked up, puzzled, then noticed the papers spread across the coffee table, the bank statements, the printed emails, the hotel reservations. His smile disappeared. I could see him scrambling for a way out before I even spoke. I kept my voice steady. "Who's she?" He blinked. "What?" "The woman you're taking to Cancun." His face went pale, thecular, draining slowly like a photo fading in the sun. "Sarah," he began, his voice shaking, "it's not what it looks like." "Oh, really?" I interrupted, sliding one of the statements across the table. "Then explain this. $10,000 was transferred from our account labeled as medical equipment on the same day you booked your flights." He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Just silence, a thick, suffocating silence. I stood up. "You made me believe I was dying, Daniel." My voice cracked. "You told me I had cancer. You made me shave my head because it would fall out soon anyway." Tears blurred my vision. "You watched me cry every night, thinking I was going to die. And you just sat there." His breathing sped up. "I didn't mean to hurt you," he whispered. "It started as a mistake. I thought if I told you, you'd stay." I froze. "Stay?" He rubbed his hands over his face. "You were distant. You wanted to leave. I thought if you believed you were sick, you'd need me. You wouldn't walk away." My stomach twisted. "So, you lied about cancer to keep me trapped." He looked desperate now. "And then the money, the money." I echoed, my voice sharp. "You drained our savings, Daniel. You sold our car. You told my family I was dying so they'd send money." He reached out, his voice shaky. "Please, Sarah." I stepped back. "Don't." The look in his eyes changed from guilt to something colder, darker. "Do you have any idea what I sacrificed for you?" He hissed. "I gave up everything to make this work." I laughed bitterly. "You gave up nothing. You just built yourself a new life while destroying mine." He slammed his hand on the table, papers flying. "You don't understand. You were always the victim, always weak. I just wanted control again. Control. That word echoed in my mind. Over and over. Control. That's what this was all about. Not love. Not desperation. Control. I turned, grabbed my phone from the counter, and pressed a button. A faint beep echoed from the living room shelf, my hidden recording device. His head snapped toward it. What's that? I met his eyes. Evidence. His face twisted in shock. You recorded me. Yes, I said. Every word since last week. You lied, you stole, and you manipulated me into believing I was dying. You're done, Daniel. He lunged forward suddenly, grabbing the recorder from the shelf. You think anyone will believe you? You're unstable, Sarah. You've been on medication for months. Medication you gave me, I said quietly. Pills I stopped taking 2 weeks ago because I realized they weren't prescriptions at all. He froze. I continued, my voice shaking but firm. They were sedatives, weren't they? To keep me quiet. To make me doubt myself. He didn't answer. His silence was louder than any confession. I backed toward the front door, clutching my phone. I've already sent copies of everything to Detective Ortiz. The bank records. The recordings. Your fake doctor documents all of it. His expression shifted from rage to fear. You went to the police. Yes. He took a step toward me, his voice low. Sarah, listen. If you do this, you'll ruin both of us. You already ruined me, I said softly. Now it's your turn. For a moment, he just stared, breathing hard, chest rising and falling like a trapped animal. Then, without another word, he turned and stormed out of the house. The door slammed shut behind him. I didn't follow. I sank onto the couch, shaking. For the first time in months, I could breathe. The next day, the police came. They collected the documents, the recordings, everything. Detective Ortiz looked at me gently. You did the right thing, Sarah. I nodded, feeling numb. That afternoon, they arrested him at the airport with a woman named Alyssa beside him. She told the officers she thought he was divorced, that the trip was their honeymoon. He didn't even look at me when they took him away. Weeks passed. The story made local news. Man fakes wife's illness for money and control. People I hadn't spoken to in years called to check on me. Some felt sorry for me. Some just wanted gossip. But I didn't care anymore. I was finally free. One evening, I walked to the mirror, the same mirror I had cried in front of when I thought I was dying. My reflection stared back, tired but alive. My hair had started to grow again, short and uneven. My skin looked pale but real. No more makeup to fake illness. No more lies. I whispered to myself, "You're still here." And for the first time, I believed it. 3 months later, a letter arrived in the mail. It was from Daniel. From prison. I almost tossed it away, but something urged me to open it. Inside was a single page. You'll never understand. I didn't want to lose you. I just wanted to be needed. I'm sorry it went too far. You'll always be my greatest love. No apology could fix what he'd done. But I didn't cry. I folded the letter, placed it back in the envelope, and tossed it into the fireplace. As the flames consumed it, I felt the last piece of him burn away. Outside, rain began to fall soft, steady, cleansing. I stepped out onto the porch, letting it wash over me. Every drop felt like freedom. Like truth. Because in the end, the worst betrayal isn't when someone lies to you, it's when they make you doubt yourself. And that's something I'll never let happen again. It's odd how silence feels different after your world comes crashing down. For weeks, the silence in my house wasn't peaceful. It was haunting. Every corner of the living room seemed to echo something Daniel had once said. Each chair, every picture frame, held a ghost of our old life. One morning, I decided I was done living with ghosts. I opened every window in the house, one by one. I let the cold air rush in, sweep through the curtains, and clear out the staleness of all those lies. The wind brought something with it, maybe courage or clarity, but I knew it was time to reclaim what belonged to me. The legal process wasn't easy. Daniel had hidden money in odd places, multiple accounts, cash transfers under fake business names, and even a private investment app I didn't know existed. When I met with the financial investigator, he said gently, "It'll take time, but we'll trace it all back." He left fingerprints everywhere. It turned out Daniel wasn't as clever as he thought. His arrogance led to his downfall. Still, the process dragged on for months. There were hearings, statements, interviews, times when I had to relive everything over and over. Each time I said, "He told me I was dying." He showed me fake medical reports. It felt like tearing open an old wound. But each time I retold the story, the scar grew tougher. Less pain, more strength. At night, I quietly worked on myself. I started journaling again, something I hadn't done since college. At first, it was just anger on paper. Later, it turned into something softer, truth. Each entry started the same way. "Dear Sarah, this time you're writing to live, not to remember." I wrote about my childhood, my family, and my mother's strength. I remembered the meals she made when life was tough: lentil soup. Always with too much garlic, but enough warmth to fill an entire house. Those memories anchored me back to who I was before Daniel B. For fear and manipulation took hold. I stopped trying to understand why he did what he did. Some things don't have reasons that make sense. Sometimes people hurt you not out of hate, but because they love themselves too much to see you as real. A few months later, I attended Daniel's sentencing. The courtroom felt cold. Sterile white walls and heavy air made my throat dry. He appeared smaller somehow. His once perfect suit had been replaced by a wrinkled orange jumpsuit. His hands were cuffed in front of him. His eyes darted toward me the moment I walked in. For a second, it seemed like he thought I might smile. I didn't. The judge read through the charges: fraud, emotional abuse, coercion, falsifying medical documents. Each word cut like glass, but also healed like truth. When it was my turn to speak, I stood up. My legs trembled, but my voice stayed steady. "Your Honor," I said softly, "he didn't just steal my money. He stole my peace, my identity, my hope. But he didn't destroy me." I found my way back. Daniel looked down at the floor. I continued, "I don't want revenge. I want closure. I want my life to mean something again, not as a victim, but as a survivor." The judge nodded. When the sentence was announced at years, with mandatory restitution, I didn't feel victory. I just felt done. Afterward, I walked out of the courthouse into the afternoon sun. The sky was that pale blue that almost feels like forgiveness. My best friend Mia was waiting by her car. She hugged me so tightly I felt her heartbeat. "It's over," she whispered. "No," I said, looking at the sunlight hitting the courthouse windows. "It's just beginning." She smiled softly. That's the Sarah I remember. In the following months, I sold the house. I couldn't stay there anymore. Too many memories were pressed into the walls. I rented a small apartment near the edge of town. It wasn't much, but it was mine. There, I started volunteering at a women's support center, helping others who had faced emotional or financial manipulation. The first time I sat in that circle of women and heard someone say, "He made me believe I was crazy," a lump rose in my throat. Because I knew that feeling. That dizzying disconnection from your own truth. So, I shared my story not as a tragedy, but as a testament. When I finished, one woman whispered, "You sound so strong." I smiled. No, I just learned that strength doesn't mean not breaking. It means building again piece by piece. But there was one last thing I had to do before I could fully move on. Daniel's mother, Linda, had always treated me kindly. She was the kind of woman who baked pies for every occasion and sent me little cards just because. After his arrest, she stopped calling. I think she didn't know what to say. One afternoon, I went to see her. When she opened the door, her eyes filled with tears. "Sarah," she whispered. "I didn't know. I'm so sorry." I took her hands. "I don't blame you." She shook her head. "He wasn't always like this. He used to be such a good boy." "I know," I said softly. "But we all make choices." We sat together in her kitchen, drinking tea in silence. Sometimes, silence is the only apology we have left. When I left, she pressed a small locket into my hand. "You keep this," she said. "He gave it to me when he was little. Maybe now, it can mean something good again." I didn't know what to say, just hugged her tightly. As I walked away, I realized forgiveness doesn't always mean reconciliation. Sometimes it just means letting the pain end with you. Back in my apartment that night, I lit a single candle and set the locket beside it. The flame flickered softly, reflecting in the small gold heart. It wasn't about him anymore. It was about the woman who survived. The woman who rebuilt. The woman who finally learned that peace doesn't come from justice. It comes from reclaiming your story. When the local newspaper published the story, I almost skipped reading it. It had a small headline tucked away among the usual news: "Local man sentenced for fraudulent medical deception." But when I saw his name, Daniel Cooper, it struck me. He was my husband. Or rather, the man I once trusted completely. The article was straightforward, almost emotionless. It reported how he faked medical documents, manipulated me, and drained our savings under the pretense of medical need. Yet it missed the deeper truth. It didn't capture the nights I cried alone, or the mornings I stared at my reflection, wondering if I'd ever feel whole again. Still, that headline did something powerful. It brought the truth into the open. Initially, I feared what people would think. Small towns thrive on gossip, and ours was no exception. But the response surprised me. At the grocery store, an older woman approached me, someone I knew only casually. She gently touched my arm and said, "I saw what he did to you, dear. You didn't deserve that. I hope you're doing okay." Her kindness opened something within me. For so long, I'd felt shame. Shame for not recognizing the signs. Shame for believing his lies. Shame for letting love blind me. But now I understood the shame was never mine to bear. The whispers around town shifted into quiet respect. People began to say things like, "She's stronger than I thought. She's rebuilding her life. She handled it with grace." It wasn't pity. It was and that acknowledgement mattered more than I could ever express. A few months later, I received an invitation to speak at a local community. The theme was financial awareness in relationships. I almost turned it down. I wasn't a public speaker, I was just a woman who had survived something terrible. But the organizer said, "Sarah, people respond to stories, not warnings." She was right. That night, I stood before a small audience, around 30 people, mostly women, some men. I took a deep breath, looked out at the expectant faces, and shared my story. Not dramatically, not angrily, just honestly. I spoke about how easily trust can become a weapon when it's misused. I talked about the red flags we ignore, the overly detailed stories, the subtle guilt trips, how manipulators blend love with control so smoothly that you can't tell where one ends and the other begins. When I finished, the room was silent for a moment. Then, someone began to clap, followed by another. Afterward, a young woman approached me with red eyes. "I think my boyfriend's doing something similar," she said, her voice trembling. "Not with money, but lies. He's isolating me." I hugged her. "Then trust your instincts," I said. "They're telling you the truth your heart might not want to accept." That night, I realized something I hadn't before. My story wasn't just mine anymore. It was a mirror for others. Meanwhile, Daniel's actions continued to have consequences. His family had to sell their vacation home to pay part of the restitution. His business reputation fell apart. No one wanted to associate with someone known for deceiving his own wife. Even his friends, the ones who once backed him, stopped reaching out. I didn't feel triumphant. But I didn't feel sorry either. Justice doesn't always bring satisfaction. Sometimes, it's just the truth standing strong while lies crumble around it. Months after the sentencing, I got a letter in the mail. The envelope had no return address, but I immediately recognized the handwriting. "Daniel." I stared at it for a long time before slowly opening it. It was brief. "Sarah, I don't expect forgiveness." I wanted to say, "I'm sorry not for getting caught, but for what I did to you. You didn't deserve it. You were the best thing in my life, and I ruined it because I was scared. Scared of losing control. Scared of losing you." I folded the letter carefully and set it aside. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. Because forgiveness isn't about reading a letter. It's a quiet decision you make when you see someone's power over you has ended. And he had. Weeks later, I chose to visit the ocean. It was something I hadn't done in years. The wind was strong that day, carrying the scent of salt and seaweed. The waves rolled in steadily, like time itself. I took the letter out of my bag and looked at it one last time. Then I tore it into pieces and let the wind carry them away. The paper fragments floated off, tiny and weightless, just like the grip he once had on me. I whispered, "Goodbye, Daniel," and felt something shift inside my chest. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't joy, it was released. By the time I walked back to my car, the sky was streaked with orange and pink. The kind of sky that makes you realize endings can be beautiful, too. That's when I truly understood the story wasn't about him anymore. It was about me. About the woman who refused to be defined by someone else's lies. I drove home that night with the windows down, the sea breeze in my hair, and one clear truth echoing in my heart. He took my savings, but I reclaimed my soul. Healing doesn't come like a sunrise, all at once and golden. It arrives in flickers, in small, quiet moments that remind you that you're still here. For me, healing started the morning I woke up and didn't think about Daniel first. I thought about breakfast. Just breakfast toast, honey, and a bit of sunlight spilling across my kitchen table. That was the first time I realized peace doesn't make noise. I began to rebuild, piece by piece. My volunteering at the Women's Center turned into a part-time job. I assisted with outreach and designed workshops in emotional manipulation, financial boundaries, and self-trust. Every week, I sat across from women who had their own versions of my story. One woman was tricked into signing over her business. Another was isolated from her friends until she barely recognized herself. Each time I listened, I felt that quiet ache of recognition, a shared grief between women who had once mistaken control for care. But then, each time I saw them smile, again that trembling, uncertain smile of someone rediscovering themselves, it healed a small part of me too. We weren't victims sitting in a circle. We were survivors creating a new language of strength. I started writing again, not journals this time, but essays. One was titled, "The Lie That Made Me Free." Another was, "How Love Should Never Sound Like Fear." I sent one to a small online magazine that published women's stories. A month later, I opened my inbox and saw, "Subject: We'd love to publish your piece." It wasn't about the recognition. It was about my voice that I had almost lost. People began reaching out, thanking me for my honesty. One message said, "Your story helped me leave a relationship I was scared to admit was toxic." I read that line 5 times and cried. Because that was it, the real redemption. Turning my pain into someone else's survival map. I found a new rhythm in life, slower, steadier. Some evenings, I would walk to the park with a thermos of tea and sit on a bench near the fountain. I watched families pass by, couples arguing softly, and children running through the grass. I didn't envy them anymore. I didn't fear love anymore either. I understood it differently. Now's something sacred, not something to surrender yourself to completely. I learned to build boundaries like fences with gates open, yet strong. Months passed, and my life began to feel like mine again. Then, one day, something unexpected happened. I met someone. His name was Ethan, a volunteer at the community center who taught financial literacy classes. He was quiet and thoughtful, the kind of man who listened more than he spoke. We started with small talk about books, about music, and about how he couldn't make a decent cup of coffee to save his life. Then one evening, while locking up after a meeting, he said softly, "You always look like you're carrying a story. The kind people should hear." I smiled. "Maybe someday I'll tell you." Over time, I did. And the beautiful part, he didn't flinch. He didn't pity me. He just listened, really listened, like every word mattered. For the first time, I didn't feel like a broken story someone had to fix. I felt like a woman someone simply wanted to know. But even with this new piece, I made a promise to myself. Never again would my happiness depend on someone else's honesty. I built a savings account in my own name. I learned about investments, set financial goals, and started teaching others to do the same. Empowerment isn't loud or glamorous. It's sitting down with a cup of tea and your own bank statement, knowing every number belongs to you. 1 year after Daniel's sentencing, I stood outside the courthouse, again, not to testify, not to fight, but to close the loop. The sky was gray, the same color it had been on that awful day of his arrest. But I wasn't the same woman. I whispered, "Thank you," to the universe, not for what happened, but for who I became because of it. That pain forged a version of me that was wiser, calmer, and deeply so. I walked away that day without looking back. That evening, I hosted a small dinner for my closest friends, Mia, a few women from the center, and Ethan. We laughed, shared stories, and toasted with cheap wine and real joy. At one point, Mia looked across the table at me and said, "You're glowing, you know." I laughed. "It's just the candlelight." But deep down, I knew it wasn't. It was peaceful, glowing quietly from the inside. Later that night, when everyone had gone home, I stood by the window and looked out at the city lights. They twinkled like scattered memories, some bright, some dim, all part of a bigger picture. And I realize maybe that's what healing truly is. Not erasing the darkness, but learning to live beautifully beside it. I whispered into the quiet room. He lied to me about death, but in a way, that lie gave me life. And for the first time in a long time, I believed every word. Sometimes, life doesn't destroy you because it's cruel. It destroys you because it's rebuilding you in a new way. Daniel's lie almost ended me. But it also forced me to discover a version of myself I didn't know existed. A woman who didn't just survive heartbreak. She turned it into purpose. I used to think love meant giving everything. Now I know real love means keeping something for yourself, to your peace, your dignity, your truth. Love that asks you to disappear isn't love. It's control dressed up. And forgiveness. It's not about saying, "It's okay." It's about saying, "It happened. And it no longer owns me." Flashbacks come to mind, her walking in the park, volunteering at the women's center, smiling at small moments of peace. Every person watching this, you might have your own Daniel. Maybe not a man. Maybe a moment, a loss, a betrayal that took something from you. But listen to me, and I mean this with all of my healed heart. You are allowed to rebuild. You can start again, softer and stronger at the same time. You can be proud of the scars that taught you how to breathe differently. I don't hate Daniel anymore. Strangely, I thank him. His lie gave me the truth I needed most, that I am whole, even when someone else tries to convince me I'm not. She takes a slow sip of tea, sets the cup down, and looks out the window one last time. And if you ever find yourself where I stood, betrayed, broken, questioning your worth, just remember this. Healing doesn't happen when you forget the pain. Healing happens when the pain stops being your home. She smiles softly. So tonight, I'm not telling a lost story anymore. I'm telling a resurrection story about a woman who was buried alive by lies and chose to dig herself out with the truth. Sometimes, the death of an illusion is the birth of your real life.